Reawaken to your immortal identity and discover life between life's wisdom. Presented by the Michael Newton Institute.
Trisha Caetano, founder and director of the International Institute for Integration Therapy and Training, is internationally renowned as a pioneer in regression therapy and inner child integration. Over the past 40 plus years, she has trained licensed psychologists, medical doctors, monks, and other healing professionals in more than 13 countries worldwide in her methodology. Founded in 1994, her popular Inner Child Integration Therapy certification program is endorsed by the acclaimed Earth Association for Regression Therapy. Trisha is a highly sought-after expert and masterful facilitator who is known for helping students achieve powerful breakthroughs and accelerate their skills through her groundbreaking model of therapy. Her innovative methods are designed to achieve fast, effective results by helping people release patterns that unconsciously impact their physical, mental, and emotional behavior in negative ways. Trisha brings a great deal of depth, humor, warmth, and compassion to her work.
As you were speaking, I think what keeps coming back to me is whether we are doing past life regression or we are even going into the soul realm where, sometimes there are clients who come for a session where they say, oh, this is what I want. And I always say, this is what you think you want. However, once we start to engage and we start to explore, allow us to respect and honor your soul's journey, because your soul knows what needs to be done. If you can take out the chatter, what you're saying is so true. We have conditioned ourselves pretty much, or we've allowed the conditioning, where when we've been probably babies from then on till now, or even probably when we were in mummy's womb, we've just constantly absorbed. There's been a lot of implants, a lot of imprints, the different influences, associative beliefs that we pick up. We get into a space where a large part of transgenerational healing, or when we're doing any kind of therapeutic journeys, essentially the child within, whoever that child is, whether it's a 2-year-old or a 20-year-old, what you said is so true. Peel away, keep peeling away till you go to that core point. And when we touch upon that core issue, once that child is able to breathe free, he or she then enables all the others who've been impacted by the same pattern or been impacted in their journey. They're willing to let things go. Because a lot of times what you said is true. We tend to externalize. And then there's a certain, I'm going to probably sound a bit blunt saying this, but there's a certain amount of escapism that comes in. And then they intellectualize it. And in sessions, I always say, okay, can we just dig a little deeper to see whose words are you carrying? Is it your mother's? Is it some grand aunt, or is it some?
Can I interrupt you briefly?
Yeah.
One of the things that I focus on the training is not to guess. Is it your aunt? Is it your mother? Is it your sister? Who said these words? My preference is to regress the client back
to that point,
the cause of the words. And so
the source of the words, Trisha, is that what you're saying? The source. You said to go to the source.
Yeah, I regress back to the causal incident that created those words.
Right.
And And I remember once I was taking a workshop years ago, and someone said, "Now go to a place where where there's a beautiful nature and there's a waterfall there, or maybe it's a pond, or maybe it's a little stream, or maybe it's a river." And my head's going, a pond, a stream, a river. So I'm going all over the place. If she just said, "Go to this beautiful place," I would have been able to create it.
In
But
nature.
instead, all of these suggestions went in there, and I'm going, I don't know what the heck I'm supposed to do now. And so for me, one of the most cherished feedbacks that I've had from students, and I have so many beautiful feedbacks, but one of this was from a psychologist who took the training, and she said, "Trisha, you have taught me so many tools. You've taught me so many methods. You have given me the opportunity to manifest who I truly am. But one of the greatest gifts you gave me was how to be with another person." And so I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all, Trisha. Because you know
It's
what
one of
I
the things,
remember? No, I
yeah,
remember you very clearly saying this, and this is something that stays with me, is to be able to hold space neutrally.
yeah, yeah.
So I think the
And
neutral holding space cracks it for anyone who's sitting there with you. And it's that moment of stillness where they feel in their space, in their thought space, that element of safety probably, or not being judged, because you're just holding space neutrally, that allows them then to connect with whatever they need to connect with.
yeah,
That's the door opener. That's how I look at it.
another ring light.
Yeah.
What I teach, and what doesn't always make sense in the beginning, is I have a Zen approach. You have to be 100% with a client, and you have to be 100% with yourself.
Yes.
And you have to hold the space for anything to happen. And I'll give you a quick example, which I just gave recently in an interview. I started working with regression therapy, and people would cry and their lives would change, and so many great things were happening. And it took me 2 years to figure out that none of my clients ever got angry. And I said, that's got to have something to do with me. And so I got myself in therapy. And as you can imagine, with the abuse, I was terrified of anger. And so I worked with the anger by healing the necessary traumas. And when I felt, okay, now I'm complete, the very next client I had was a man, and he came in. He said, "I'm so angry, I could take your furniture and throw it all over the room." I said, "Okay." And he went. I said, "Do you want to work on your anger?" He says, "Yeah," but he says, "I'll lose control." I said, "Well, let's start and see what happens." And it was a fabulous session. He worked with his anger and got to the grief under the anger. But anyway, so the point is that I couldn't hold the space for anger because I hadn't dealt with my own anger yet. That's why so much of the training I'm doing is, why not use all these methods on yourself as well as practicing on your clients?
So true.
And there's one other thing I want to comment on, and that's past lives.
Trisha, before you go to past life, I'm very keen, if I may ask you to just explore what you shared, because I know for our viewers this is beautiful. Anger is just a presenting emotion. What most of us do is we very neutrally, very compassionately hold space for the client to go beneath the anger, what sits there. And most of the time it is grief, helplessness, the sense of abandonment or rejection, or what pain sits there. So
there's two things.
Yeah.
There's two things. In our society, little boys in school and at home have permission to be angry. It's just a social structure that seems to be pretty much universal.
Yeah.
So if a little boy gets angry, they might say, "Well, yes, I see that you're angry, big deal." But if a little girl gets angry, you shouldn't be angry. Good girls don't get angry. But, and I love to do this with big audiences, say to the men, How many of you were abused in grade school when you cried? And all the hands go up because they weren't allowed socially. And we have to take this into consideration in the healing, not just the family and ourselves, but the environment in which we're born.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so women cover up their anger by crying. Men cover up their grief with anger. So it's not always about getting under the anger. It's about, with women, when it's necessary, we have to help them manifest their anger, because socially and usually at home, they had no permission to do that. And so that's what I'm saying. We have to take each client as an individual and not assume
Yes.
that if you get angry, there's grief under it, or if you're crying, there's anger under it. We just have to stay with the client, and they'll show us where to go and what to do.
Because what you just said really, really helps, because if you stay with it, it itself unfurls, opens, and then whatever sits there is sitting there. It's waiting there, basically, whatever it is.
I'll give you one question I always ask a new client, and if they're codependent, I'll ask them every session. And so remember this phrase. When you're doing your intake, your last sentence is, what do you expect to happen with this session? And then you get things like, well, if I do this past life regression, then my husband will love me. Well, if I just do this inner child thing, then I'll be able to control my environment. I'm going, okay, we got to pull that belief before we can start anything. Because I remember doing a session with a woman in Japan, and she was just, well, she was awfully cute and adorable, but she was very frivolous. And so she wanted to do past life regression. There was resistance. Finally got her into a past life where she was scrubbing dishes in a castle back in the 1300s. And she was just, the whole life, she was just a slave and grudging around with this filth and grease. And so she came out of the regression very unhappy. And I said, what's happening? She said, well, I thought if I did a regression, I would be a princess. And that's when I realized you got to pull these hidden agendas, or the client's going to try and manipulate the session. If they think their husband's going to love them because they're going to go back to their childhood when their father didn't love them or whatever, it sabotages your session and really makes you have to do a lot more work than you need to.
It's true. It's true. Trisha, this this is bringing me to a very well, let's say curiosity, if I may say. When we are exploring different elements or different aspects, and you're sharing so many of these, I would say, nuggets of gold that's coming from you in inner child healing. When a soul is on its journey, and each of us are on our journey right now, this experience on planet Earth that we're having, in context of all that humanity is going through, we have a very beautiful generations that come along, the younger ones today. And if I may share this, I notice in them, and I'm talking about most of the young ones who would be, let's say, in their pre-teens and early teens, or even younger, they come across way more sensitive, if I may say this. There's a certain sensitivity which is very visible or very apparent, which, is it something to do with the generational shift that's happening? Is it the societal shift that's happening? And there's so much that's happening in the world today. There's, before one can think and deal with one aspect of trauma that's happening in, say, a part of the world, and there's another one that's happening in all of that. But the generation that I'm talking about, which would be roughly maybe 6, 7 years old till, say, maybe 12, 13, you notice in them a very palpable level of sensitivity. They come across more sensitive, if I may say so. Now, in the journey of the soul and in a generational understanding, because I'm sure when you're, doing sessions with clients, when you're teaching, you see people from all decades of life, right? All age groups are coming to you. What's your take on the element of the shift that's happening, the sensitivity that we seem to be seeing amongst the youngsters in context with the soul's journey? Because as you said rightly, healing the inner child is a large part of what we even have done as students when we were training to become therapists. And so any therapy we learned, any facilitation we learned, it was all about self-healing through and through. This is how I see it, that's what each of us still go through in each class that we attend. But sensitivity with the juniors, the kids, youngsters.
The first thing is, I said you had to be aware not only of yourself and your environment, but the culture you were born in. You have to also take in the planet that we've chosen to live on, and at this time, and we have to also take in the harmony of the universe. And we are entering the Aquarian age. We're coming out of Pisces into Aquarian, and it's about a 200 years to make those transitions. Each age has its positive and negative. But I'm going to present my viewpoint, and you don't have to agree with it. I think all children are born sensitive. I think they're born with so much awareness. I know when we're working with children who may have died after they were born and then were resuscitated. And we have to work with everything that contributes. And for example, going back to the young children again, I had a client who came to a public past life regression training I was doing, or class I was doing. And she came up to me afterwards and said, I just realized that I've never felt happy before. And so I want to do more past life regressions and get happiness and joy and anger and fear. I want to pick all those because I don't have emotions. And so we went into past lives looking for the cause of this kind of disassociation. We went into pre-birth experience, which is something we do in the training, and then to birth, nothing. So I'm going, well, it's not anywhere there. It's got to be somewhere else then. And so at the age of 10 months, her father got into an automobile accident. A drunk driver hit him. She was 10 months old in the back seat, and she went shooting out through the windshield and way out into a dirt field. And the father, injured, but he gets out of the car and running to the field, and he comes and picks her up, and he shakes her and says, are you okay? Please, please be okay. And it turns out she was so close at the age of 10 months to where she had been between lives, that when she shot out of the window, she shot out of her body and said, oh, okay, this is cool. I can hang out here. She never got back in her body. So I got her back in her body. And I don't know if that was a good thing or not, because then she fell in love for the first time in her life, and that person rejected her. And then she came back for therapy so you never know where it's going to take you. But for me, I'm not sure that. I know there's cycles. I know there's waves. I know the wave that were, in the 60s and 70s, before a lot of you were born, we had, that was the age of Aquarian. That was when we were marching against the Vietnam War. That's when we were into health foods. That's when we were going to change the world. And so, the pendulum swung in that direction. Well, guess where the pendulum's going now? In the opposite direction. And so I think the children born in the new age and the youngsters, and people talk about these violet children, the color violet.
Yeah, I hear that.
Or too. Blue or something. I think
indigo. They say indigo.
Indigo. Thank you. I knew it was somewhere in that range. and they talk about indigo. I'm going, every generation has indigo children. Most children are born sensitive, unless they bring trauma in from the past life or the birth or the womb. And so for me, I want to know about these things. I want to understand, as uncomfortable as I am, with what's happening in too many places on the planet now, and how comfortable I was with, going into health foods and marching against Vietnam Wars. Um, I have to understand that it's a cycle. And I also feel, again, I think we do come in generational waves.
Yes.
And I think a lot of us are here now because the planet is in jeopardy. And I think that people like you, people like those of you who are listening to this, I think that again, going in, I think a wave of us came at this particular time to try and reverse the opposite end of that pendulum. And so I think there are waves, I think there are elements, but I think children are great. And it's just when they get beat up and abused that they aren't so great anymore. I also want to make a comment. I know you have questions, but this concept of inner child, it puts what we do in a box. It puts the training I'm doing in a box. And that's why I call it integration therapy, because the first part is about working with the traumas of the childhood or the past life, if that comes in. But the second half is integrating other therapeutic paradigms and models into the process. And so no one method works. Well, I do Gestalt. Well, I do psychosynthesis. Well, I do cognitive behavior. Well, I think what I do is better than what you're doing. I'm going, stop. All of this judgment. I think, no, it's not about a child per se that we have to bring back here and try and love or heal. Or, of course, that happens. But for me, the children that we access visually and emotionally are representative of that trapped energy. And so, yes, the age that trauma occurred, it will present as a child. But we're working at a much broader basis. And it's just like I'm going to say one thing about past lives. People have been talking about past lives, past lives. I'm going, no, that assumes time is linear, and time is not linear. It's Kairos time. And so I remember once I had a client, and we went to a very traumatic lifetime, and we worked with it and healing energy. And then I said, we were working on self-worth. And so I said, what needs to happen for you to completely release this lifetime to the past where it belongs? Now, this was in the very beginnings when we were still studying past life work. And so the client says, I need to go to a future life when I feel confidence. I need to bring it back to this life. I went, huh? This was many years ago. And I said, what am I going to do with it? So I said, okay, do it. And he did. And I had another tool. And so this whole thing, it's not always about past lives, because that's that old-fashioned linear concept. And that thing was passed, say, 100 years ago.